Itch, itch. Hi everyone, Hyde Place Tano here, the internet's busiest music nerd. And it's time for a review of the new BACKWOODZ and Kenny Segal album, Hiding Places. Since I started following his work earlier this decade, New York rapper BACKWOODZ transformed his once sort of spotty discography into one of the most perplexing, consistent, and heavy-hitting in underground hip-hop. And maybe some of you guys don't feel that way, but I do. From his powerfully dark and sobering solo works like History Will Absolve Me, as well as Known Unknowns, to his imperfect but admirable attempt at writing an album of just very short, brief rap vignettes on Today I Wrote Nothing. And I should also mention the increasingly impressive output of the duo that he's in with Elucid Arm & Hammer. Billy's rap style is admirably unique, bordering very much on spoken word in his tone and delivery. He writes a lot of very gritty and cryptic bars that are often enhanced with an incredibly dark sense of humor, which a lot of times does seem sort of like a coping mechanism. And I would also say Billy could be defined by his devastating cynicism, as well as the kind of social commentary that reminds us that we live in a sick, sad world. If you're more in the market for like a feel-good Macklemore jam, Billy's probably not going to be your cup of tea. And on this album, Billy is teaming up with LA beat wizard Kenny Segal. This dude has solo efforts going back to the 2000s. He made a few production appearances on the last Arm & Hammer album. There was already an established connection there, so it's no surprise that Billy and Kenny would have possibly worked on a full LP, which he has done before with the legendary Blockhead on 2 albums. And considering the caliber of producers that Billy could be or has worked with in the past, I don't think he'd bring Kenny into the fold this deeply if he wasn't bringing some production heat. Some of that red hot beat heat! And so what's Billy's story this time around on this record? In many respects, it's sort of a same old thing, though that's not entirely a bad thing because I am generally pretty impressed by the grim and very defeatist stories that he works into his tracks. Lyrically, Billy continues to reveal so much, and yet he himself remains in the shadows. Hiding Places is actually a very fitting title for this album because the songs off of this record feel like they were written by somebody who is like holed up in a dingy apartment. Of course, like every project up until this point, Billy brings some amazing and hard-hitting one-liners that are just beyond clever, some that are incredibly self-deprecating and see Billy taking shots at his own obscurity. Too scared to write the book, took it, put it in the hook of a song. No one listened to it. Looks like I wasn't wrong. Album dropped with a thud. Awkward silence, like when the grenade had dud. A bar that comes off of the track Steak Knives, which is a song all about getting second place. The title itself is a reference back to old game shows that gave away steak knives as consolation prizes. Billy essentially dating himself pretty heavily on the subject matter and reference on this song. However, even though this track is kind of short, and I do wish it went on a little bit further, I do think Billy ends it in a genius fashion where he is in a car with a friend, he's not doing too good, they're kind of talking about sharing in the same misery and experiences. Billy says the steak knives mantra out loud in the car, and his friend says, "What you say?" And he says, "It's just a line, it's just a line." Creatively portraying Billy as someone who's out there in the world having everyday interactions, but also these songs and these rhymes are just playing through his head. He's existing in his brain with these songs. These themes continue onto bars like, "Dark comedy dog, I beat him in the head. Win what? I'm just trying to beat the spread. Quit my job to kick raps instead. So family meeting. Everybody gotta start bringing in bread." At the end of this particular track, Billy's delivery gets even more heated, as if he's slowly going mad, with this claustrophobic beat of detuned guitars and horror movie synths and stretched out crash cymbals closing in on him. There are just so many tracks on this record that bring this infectious sense of dread that only intensifies on certain other cuts from this record, like the track Spider Hole, which also features quite a few isolationist themes, like "It's just me in the spider hole, that's the best part. Broad smile, copping legal weed from fake hole in the wall. I don't want to go see Nas with an orchestra at Carnegie Hall. No man of the people, I wouldn't be caught dead with most of y'all." Between the references that Billy drops, the character building, the evocative imagery, I love hearing him rap, but also he is so much of a poet. I'm almost just as pleased to read what he's written. I think Billy's poetic prowess is certainly on display on the opening lines of HOUTHI. Stood pooled in porch light, cut my shadow off with a dull knife, whispered in its ear, then sent it off into the night. Set the trap for the mice, the rats, whatever's in the pipes. Corner of your eye, the edge of the white, that's where I live, I'm set for life. To put it in a way that I think the kids will get, a lot of what Billy Woods raps on this record actually reminds me of the past couple of Earl Sweatshirt albums. Mostly when it comes down to the lyrical themes, although there are quite a few instrumentals on this record that are very drony and lo-fi and kind of mellow. But again, there's very much an overlap in Billy's subject matter, in Earl's subject matter, between the depression, the isolationism, in how his mental state and all the awful things in the world around him kind of manifest themselves in these terrible things that just ruin his life, make him just, I guess, in a sorrier state. I think that's pretty much the point of the song off of this record, A Day in a Week in a Year, which features some pretty heavy and dark stuff, even references to addiction. Look, I'm no stranger to, and am very much a big fan of comedy, dark comedy, laughing in the face of all the terrible things that the world is throwing at you, but the degree to which Billy embraces that on this record even makes my eyes go wide at some points, like on the track Big Fake Laugh, where he says, I got a letter from my insurer the other day, opened it and read it, and there's a bit of an aside where he says, this is going to be good news. Said that the treatment wasn't covered. Turned to the family like, I guess I'll just forget it. Just forget it. Big fake laugh. Ah ha 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 ha. This ain't a Denzel movie. Don't try to think fast. While I don't think this album necessarily features Billy's most well-crafted set of songs in terms of structure and hooks and progressions and topical focus and all that jazz, it is certainly his most personally cutting record so far. The production on this record is generally pretty great, even if some of the structures on these songs are a little flat and repetitive to the point where they stale out some of the crisp and quality loops that Kenny brings to the table. Still though, I do love the deflated and sad melodies as well as thuddy drums on the opening track SpongeBob. They are a perfect tone setter for the record and also Billy's lyricism. I love the thick, mellow, melodic, and drony Spider Hole. It is absolutely sad and gorgeous. I love the dreamy flute melodies on the track HOUTHI, as well as the sweet little jazz chord changes that are peppered throughout a few points of the song. Also, the girthy juggernaut beats and massive bass hits on the track Big Fake Laugh add up into a great instrumental as well. I will say, as far as cons of this album, in the grander scheme of Billy's discography, narratively, this isn't a huge change of pace. It's not a major revelation or anything. The most refreshing thing about it conceptually is the inclusion of Kenny Segal, and while I do love his production on this album, I wouldn't say putting Billy and him together is necessarily a game changer or anything like that. I also wouldn't say there's anything particularly special about how the songs on this album are sequenced or flow. Mostly feels like a loose collection of songs that are somewhat tied together by all of the emotional and personal traumas that Billy details through the lyrics. The features on this album are okay. I wouldn't say they lead to a whole lot of stunning moments either. Elucid's appearance on this thing is surprisingly short and, in my opinion, doesn't provide a whole lot to the record itself. The Mother Mary appearance on here is a bit of a head-scratcher in that the track A Day, I think, very much needed a melodic vocal lead of some sort, given how mellow the song is, but her singing is so faint on this song, it's just almost not there in a way. Self Jupiter of Freestyle Fellowship is actually hands down the best feature on this entire thing, not only from his very smart and entertaining bars in the first half of his verse, but also sort of the mini acted out sketch that he plays out in his own mind over the instrumental when the instrumentation turns into a somewhat of a creepy soundtrack of sorts is actually pretty amazing. I think he handles this track really well. The transitions that he performs are pretty cool, although I will say instrumentally, this particular track does feel like the biggest hodgepodge on the entire album, which consistently, as I go back to it again and again and again, I just feel really kind of lost in it, and not really in a way that's all that fulfilling. Also, to take it back to the track Crawl Space that Elucid featured on, there is a bit of a weird beat switch on that track that kind of let me down a little bit, in that it's not that I dislike the first beat on the track or the one that we eventually moved into, but the very bland fade that introduces the change really just to me felt very, I don't know, underwhelming. It's like the most uneventful beat change I can imagine. There's no drama or hit or anything to that introduction of this different instrumental. Still, having said all of this, some of Billy's best material does turn up on this record. Best verses, best performances. Kenny generally on this thing pretty much kills it. As someone who's been listening to Billy's work for a little while now, I feel like this record for me is just continuing to follow him down the rabbit hole and mostly loving every minute of it. Even if after this album, little worried about the guy. Feeling a strong 7 to a light 8 on this thing. Transition, have you given this album a listen? Did you love it? Did you hate it? What would you rate it? You're the best, you're the best. What should I review next? Hit the like if you like. Please subscribe and please don't cry. Hit the bell as well. Over here next to my head is another video that you can check out. Hit that up or the link to subscribe to the channel. Anthony Fantano, Billy Woods, Kenny Segal, Hiding Places, Forever.